Good afternoon to you. I am Mark Sudduth in Wilmington, North Carolina. It's May 1st, Monday, May 1st, 2023, and it is time to talk about the upcoming hurricane season. That thumbnail there posing the question, are you ready? This is very important. Hurricane preparedness. It's time to think about that again. This week is National Hurricane Preparedness Week, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. I don't want to be here lecturing you for too long, but just to prompt you to think about preparedness. What does that mean exactly? And then we're going to take a look at the usual stuff that we take a gander at every week. El Nino, what's going on with that, the latest in sea surface temperature anomalies, some forecast thoughts, a look at lower 48 weather, and a few odds and ends in between. All right, good to have you join me. I do appreciate it. Let's get rolling, shall we? It is National Hurricane Preparedness Week. This is very important, being ready mentally, physically, and fiscally, with an F. Financially, what does all that mean? Well, it's different for everybody. You can visit the National Hurricane Center site. I'll put a link to this in the description of today's video. Most people that live in a hurricane-prone area do think about hurricanes at some point or another. It's not pleasant. They are exciting inherently, and that doesn't have to be necessarily meaning that it's a fun thing, but it's just like right now in my office, if an elephant were to burst through the wall, that'd be crazy. It would be exciting, even though it would be pretty damaging to my house. That word exciting doesn't mean the same as we're going to Disney World. Hurricanes are very serious. Even tropical storms can be. Heck, even a depression. And so the main thing I want to drive home to you is think about yourself. I talk about this often. Weather is when you can really be selfish. Say to yourself, how will this affect me? Be a little bit narcissistic about it. How will this affect me? And then let it branch out from there. Your family, your friends, your colleagues, and fully understanding what to expect when a hurricane comes your way starts with the very basics of understanding your vulnerability. Where do you live? Where do you live in relation to hazards, especially storm surge? You want to assess those risks and then make a plan that is tailored to you. A hurricane preparedness plan for a multimillionaire that has a very nice beach house versus somebody that's in a single-family home, barely making it paycheck to paycheck, those hurricane preparedness plans are going to be vastly different. It really is the case, all right? So just think about that, and especially if you have additional challenges in your life, whether they be financially. It's very difficult for you to prepare financially. Hotel rooms for evacuation, gas to evacuate, buying a generator, things like that, all the way up to maybe, and this is a common thing more and more now, taking care of a family member, whether it be an elderly family member, somebody that might have cancer or breathing problems. We're still dealing with COVID and the issues related to long COVID and just a myriad of other potential challenges, including pets. We don't think about pets too often until we have to. You might have exotic lizards, birds, cats, dogs, one, two, many of them, whatever. You have to think about all of this. So hurricanes, yes, they are scary at times. They can be overwhelming, very stressful, but you can't ignore the problem and just hope that it's not going to bother you, because a good friend of mine in emergency management down in Collier County once told me in an interview that hope is not a planning tool. You cannot just hope that nothing will happen. And that's a good rule of thumb for pretty much anything in life, that hope by itself, that's not a plan. So just think about National Hurricane Preparedness Week. There are a lot of resources out there. Again, National Hurricane Center, a good stopping point or starting point, whichever way. It's a good stop along your route to start. Does that make any sense? I hope so. But do check it out. And if you do have questions, ask in the comments. Ask on Facebook groups, on Twitter, elsewhere, and talk to your friends and neighbors, especially if you are new to a region that gets hurricanes. Like you're right at the coast, you just moved to the coast. Ask people who have been through them and make sure you are ready. So the question is, are you ready? I want you to be, but just remember, being ready is different for everybody. It's a very individual type of thing, okay? Okay, now let's move on and look at the normal topics for this week, or what we look at on a weekly basis anyway. The ENSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation Phenomenon, very important. The SOI is a great way to track what's going on with the pressure patterns across the tropical Pacific And this is interesting. It's come back up a little bit. You can see that here on the tabular part here where the 30-day average is, let's just round it and call it 0. It's flat. And then the 90-day average has come down, certainly, but it's still at 2.48, and today's contributor is 12.58. And look, we have seen a rise over here in the 30-day. The 90-day has become generally flat. As I have pointed out before, once we get to about -7 and lower, we are typically in an El Nino state where the atmosphere and the tropical Pacific are working in concert to give us the mechanism to get that El Nino going and sustain it. We are not there yet. We're not there yet, and it's May 1st. The clock is ticking. The faster we get to that El Nino state, the more impact it'll likely have on the upcoming hurricane season. I think that is easy logic to follow. So let's see what else we have going on out there. There's the SOI. Very interesting look to it overall. How does that translate to the current sea surface temperature pattern? Well, there is warming in the equatorial Pacific, especially right here off the coast of South America, Peru, and vicinity out towards the Galapagos Islands. But the Nino 3.4 region right through here, it's warming up, but it's not yet El Nino. We're at about 0.4 Celsius above the long-term average out across this region right through here. And we still have that cold PDO look over here, that horseshoe shape of coldness. But ladies and gentlemen, I want to draw your attention again to this remarkable, the warming of the Canary Current off the coast of the Iberian Peninsula, that is Spain and Portugal, of course, the northwest coast of Africa off the Canary Islands. That is really, really remarkable. We're talking in the upper echelons of warming now. 2010, 2005, 2020, all hyperactive historic years for one reason or another, whether you're talking about ACE, the energy that is output by hurricanes, or impacts, and in some cases a combination of all of those. The Atlantic is primed by itself. If it was all by itself and we weren't worried about what's happening in the Pacific, the Atlantic is primed to give us a very, very busy hurricane season as far as the correlation goes with sea surface temperatures and how they affect the overall Atlantic activity. But, of course, there's probably an El Nino coming. And again, it is really going to come down to how fast does this area warm up to where it creates upward motion and imparts shear across this area, especially of the Caribbean and into the tropical Atlantic. Most of this area in the subtropics up here and out of the deep tropics, not affected by El Nino. So anything that comes across that gets sheared out here could survive, bust through all of that, and become a problem for the Bahamas, for Florida, the Gulf, the East Coast, who knows. But we're not there yet. Like I said, we are not in an El Nino yet. So we have a ways to go. We shall see. Here's a close-up of this. This is absolutely incredible. It really is. From the whole oceanographic, meteorological standpoint, this is really remarkable to see. These anomalies in here. Look down at the scale. Look at these bright reds, almost to darker reds. We're talking 3 Celsius, warmer than average, right off the coast of the African continent there, the Canary Current as we call it. Very, very unusual to see this. It is owed to the fact that we have had less strong trade winds out this way, this negative North Atlantic oscillation, a lowering of the pressures across this region, allowing the water to just kind of warm up. It's not being blown across, again, like a cup of coffee. You blow across that coffee, you cool off the surface there, and it makes it more sippable. Kind of like the same thing we're talking about here. When you blow strong trade winds, you have evaporation, mixing, and other features that go into cooling those sea surface temperatures, and we are not seeing that. And it even bleeds into these warm temperatures relative to average, the main development region itself, which is this zone through here. But this right here is a big, big indicator of a very busy hurricane season if it weren't for the upcoming presumed development of El Nino. And even Dr. Klotzbach, of course, pointing this out. Current North Atlantic sea surface temperature anomaly pattern matches up well, he says, with what is typically seen in May prior to very active Atlantic hurricane seasons. And of course, there it is. The potential El Nino, hopefully, is coming in to save the day. But we will see. I don't want people to hang all of their hopes, again, there's that word, on El Nino. You can't do, well, hopefully the El Nino will come and I don't need to do any preparation this year. I hate to say it, but it only takes one. Think about Ian last year. Last year was forecast to be gangbusters busy. It fell well short of that. Numbers-wise, the ACE was lower. The amount of named storms, etc., were all lower. But we still had Ian for the United States. And we still had Fiona for Puerto Rico. And especially for our friends up in Nova Scotia. It only takes one. And for that region that I just mentioned, that was Fiona. For Florida, and even to some extent South Carolina there, of course, that was Ian. So you just never know, all right? El Nino or not, you need to be ready. Hyperactive season, slow season. You just got to take it seriously. Think about it a little bit at least. That's all I'm asking you to do. Don't ignore it. And that'll help reduce the stress later, and that's what we want to do. Now, this is really interesting to me as well. I watch these so-called Hofmolar diagrams with great interest because even though it's hard to figure out what you're looking at unless you're used to these things, it is very telling in terms of the wind pattern across a good deal of the planet, and in most cases, the way this works, the entire planet. So what are we looking at? Well, these are your wind anomalies. Let's use, I think I still have the color black here. So the blues are going to be stronger trade winds. We'll simplify it. And these reds are enhanced trade winds, okay? And we're looking at longitudinally. If you looked at the globe in this fashion, this is where it would be happening. And then we have time in the past here going towards the present and future as you go down the chart. All right, so everything below this line right here is in the future. Here we are, May 1st. There's May 6th, 11th, and 16th. That makes good sense. So coming up way over in the Indian Ocean, now that's not the tropical Pacific. I think we all can agree to that. A strong westerly wind burst. These are very anomalously strong westerly winds at the 5,000 foot level, 850 millibars of the atmosphere. Over in the ENSO regions, which is roughly here over towards the date line, mostly stronger trades. None of these reds are showing up at all. So you have normal in here, just regular old, not warmer, or not stronger, not slower. But these blues in here, that is an enhanced area of trades, nothing ridiculous. And then, yes, the Atlantic looks like it could pick up in the realm of more trades as we get into May. That might help to temper the warming that we have seen. But I just wonder, look, this gets us out to mid-May, and we're not seeing a strong westerly wind burst. What does that look like for the Pacific? This is what gave us the warming that we're seeing now in the ENSO regions. That was a while back, and even further back in time into March, okay? Nothing in the next couple of weeks. And I don't think anything will just jump out and surprise us. Part of this can be tracked to the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, and the way that that propagates through from the western Pacific into the western hemisphere. And we're just not seeing that, at least the strong westerlies, show up in these Hofmolar diagrams. And the longer we wait, the less that El Nino has a chance to influence at least the front part of the hurricane season. It's going to be really, really interesting to see how this turns out, meteorologically speaking, oceanographically speaking, and from a societal impact perspective. Do we get a whole bunch of storms that are all out in the eastern Atlantic and they end up being basically of concern only to maritime interests? Or does the El Nino get overwhelmed by all of this? I've been asking this question for the better part of a few weeks now, and it's not clearer anymore today. It's just the way it goes. So stay tuned. It's going to be interesting. We'll all figure it out together. All right, so looking at a little bit related to tropics and lower 48 weather, as we get closer and closer to the start of the season, we'll keep using the color black here. I think let's use the blue. Pops out better. We will be watching mostly this area from now on in, basically. It's not hurricane season yet, but it's May. We can start looking at the computer models closer to see if there are any suspect areas that start to jump out, consolidated areas of thunderstorms or convection that are organizing. Of course, there's nothing out there now, but we're going to start watching this area, and then, of course, the southeast Pacific from now basically until the end of November. No, it's not hurricane season yet, but we're close enough. We can have some May activity. In fact, I'm going to show you a really neat map product off of our website in just a minute. But these are the areas that we're going to be watching over the coming weeks, especially as we get closer to June. Meanwhile, though, before we get there, big old mid-latitude storm, ridiculous amounts of snow in the upper peninsula of Michigan. Look at all the snowpack. Speaking of snow out west, that's a good thing, though it is starting to melt, and that is creating problems for runoff and flooding and so forth. A big story, of course, out that way. Now, here is that map I wanted to show you. One of our good friends from Bermuda, Mr. Howard Simons, put this together for us. A wonderful tool to look at the past. So here's May 1st through the 10th, and the points of origin. We can scooch this over and zoom in. Not a lot of activity. What is that, 5 over the last, going back to 1851, updated through last year. And we look at some of these. You can mouse over them. 2021, we got started early. Yes, we did. This one was from 2017. All years where we had a very warm Atlantic, right? And then this one is from 1932. That one's from 1981. And then this one up here, 2015. I remember that. That was a big El Nino year, too, by the way. But what happens when we go out into the next 10 days? You start adding more and more. And then finally, the last third of the month, yes, you start to see that obviously the hurricane season starts to get going, especially in the eastern Pacific. But even all of this development begs the question, why not just start hurricane season in May? There's plenty of activity out there. There's no hurricanes. Just call it tropical cyclone season. But the point is, this should all prompt you that, yes, we're getting closer, and you have to start thinking about it, whatever that means for you. Like I said, I'll keep hammering that point. Everybody's different, but use this as a wake-up call. Hurricane season is coming, and you need to be ready for it. All right, we'll look at this map more and more as we go through the hurricane season. I'll reference it from time to time as a great climatological benchmark of where we have been to help us kind of understand where we might be going. All right? All right, so the GFS here off the Tropical Tidbit site, we'll be looking at this often as well. This is the Western Atlantic, the 850 millibar level of the atmosphere. Nice area of high pressure over here. That's what that shows. Big old trough. Whoops, I grabbed me. Big old trough here in the Western Atlantic over eastern North America. Not time for really watching this area closely just yet, but let's get rid of all that. Hopefully it'll cooperate. I'll show you what we will kind of be looking for. Down here in the deep tropics, we want to see, do any of these areas of vorticity conglomerate and come together and, is that a word? I think it is. Aggregate or whatever. Do they come together and give us a viable system that could develop? And let's just take a look at the next 10 days or so. There's a few impulses that come off of South America down there, off of Colombia. By the way, in case you're wondering, where are you talking about? I don't know my maps that well. Right there. That vorticity streams off of Colombia very often. Usually doesn't amount to much. Once in a while, that can come together with a tropical wave and get that spin going. But over the next week or so, no, nothing down there to be of any concern over. And then we're out there at a week, and now we're at about 9 days, and finally day 10. Nope, once we get out to May 11th, nothing down in the Caribbean, the Western Caribbean, pretty much straight trade winds coming through here. What we will be watching for is to see if we get some westerly winds coming in through here out of the eastern Pacific, and this gyre setting up called the Central American gyre. Later on in May, that typically tries to set up, and you can get one of these impulses that'll kind of rotate around that, and it'll consolidate, that's the word I'm looking for, and give us the potential of something coming up into the Gulf of Mexico. That's where early season development sometimes gets started. All right? So we'll be watching this, the 850 millibar level of the atmosphere. That's my favorite area to watch because that's closest to the surface, and that's sort of the skeleton of everything. And if that's there, that's what these tropical systems can build upon. If you don't have anything down at the 5,000 foot level or so, at the surface basically, then there's no need to look anywhere else. All right? All right, now let's jump over to lower 48 weather a little bit more. A few things to point out here. Out west, most of this is your hydrologic outlook and or flood watches and warnings, river flood warnings, that kind of thing, mostly related to the snowpack that is melting and bringing all that fresh water. It's cold water too, So just be advised if you're heading out there. People are graduating college, and they're going to be heading out to do something fun before they start the real world or go to grad school or whatever. If you're doing hiking, hey, pay attention. Make sure you know what you're getting into. You might see some beautiful rushing water. It is frigid, so just be wary of that. Some heavy rain up in the northeast related to that storm system that has been parked over the east these last few days, and then the very heavy snow, and even some storm warnings up here off of Superior along the north coast of the upper peninsula of Michigan. And then out in Arizona, a little bit of windy conditions and some fire danger down in southwest Arizona. So just be wary of that. Severe weather, at least that won't be a big deal today or tomorrow. Maybe a little bit of an enhanced risk there. Or, I'm sorry, that's actually a term, enhanced. Figure out how to term that. They say marginal, but it's just a little bit more of a risk tomorrow, we'll say. And then let's move me over here. And then finally by day 3, that is Wednesday, just not much. We just don't have a lot of warm air flooding into the country right now. That big sort of omega block type pattern with a cool big old cyclonic flow in the east. Not much southwesterly flow in the plains states. Moisture advection and transport. The buoyancy of the atmosphere is not there. And a triggering mechanism. Normally you need like a big old trough to dig in here and give you that southwest flow. With a low-level flow coming this way, you get the turning of the atmosphere and all that stuff. And mayhem ensues in the form of supercells. Not always mayhem, but you get the idea. It's not there right now, and that's a good thing. But heading out to day 4, that's popping up there, triggering the 15%. In fact, let's just look at it. 15% there across Texas into Oklahoma. Beyond the next several days, though, I think there is a chance, looking at some of what some of the people that I follow regarding severe weather are saying, that we might break this pattern down, get more southwesterly flow into the southern plains, more buoyancy to the atmosphere, and then these triggers, these short waves or even long wave troughs. Troughs are the triggers. They're the sort of match that lights the fire, if you will. We might see more of that as we get further into May. And once that happens and we get multi-day threats, let me just get rid of me for a second, because I do want to point this out. Once we start seeing your threats out here day after day, more than just one day at a time, I'm going to go out there. We're going to take some of our equipment. I've talked about this before. And we're going to do some stuff, some very interesting things, including testing our weather balloon project in the vicinity of a dry line event. That would be amazing to see, watching the dry line explode from the stratosphere, looking down on it. A good way to test our Herbie, the hurricane research balloon, because eventually we want to launch it into the eye of a hurricane at daytime. We've done it once, but it was at night. Hurricane Nate back in 2017. In fact, that's in our documentary, Tracking the Hurricanes 2017, available on Amazon Prime and, of course, on YouTube, crowdfunded by people just like you. So check that out if you want to see what a hurricane's eye looks like in the nighttime. Spoiler alert, it's pretty dark. But yeah, we want to do that during the day someday, and we got to practice it, all right? All right, and we'll be ready too. Are you ready? Well, that applies to me as well. So keep that in mind. All right, that is it from me for today. As always, thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, trip up those, trigger them. Make those YouTube algorithms work in our favor. I do appreciate everybody tuning in and watching and commenting and following our channel. It's awesome. I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack. That's our brand. I'll be back with you next week. If not sooner, you never know. Have a good rest of your week.